The air in the cathedral was thick with the scent of lilies, betrayal, and the suffocating wealth of the Alistair dynasty. I, Eleanor Vance, stood paralyzed at the altar, the crisp white silk of my dress suddenly feeling like a flag of surrender. The 300 affluent guests were held in a stunned, collective silence that magnified the sound of my father, Richard Vance, relinquishing my arm. Julian Alistair, the man I was to pledge my life to, stood next to my mother, Vivienne Vance. Her eyes, the same piercing green as mine, were gleaming with a venomous and calculated triumph. "I object," Vivienne's voice declared, a precise, surgical cut through the silence. Julian delivered the fatal blow, his expression chillingly devoid of the affection he had meticulously manufactured for 3 years. "Eleanor, I cannot marry you. I love Vivienne. We will marry today. Do not worry, Eleanor, you will still have your place in the family. As her daughter." The audacity was breathtaking. As they walked out, arm in arm, ignoring the ensuing chaos, the image was imprinted forever. The perfect, spectacular public execution of my life. I remember the dizzying descent into darkness, the heavy silence of the marble floor, the last sensation I registered. I regained consciousness in a private hospital suite, my head throbbing. My father, frail and defeated, confirmed the inescapable. Julian and Vivienne had been legally married within the hour at the registry office. The entire city was gorging on the scandal, the headlines screaming of the mother-daughter betrayal. My grief was public and my dignity was utterly lost. That same night, amid the ruins of my wedding preparations, the call came, a lifeline from the depths. "Miss Vance, I am Dr. Marcus Thorn. Your mother's motive is not affection, it is capital. Julian's inheritance hinges on a clause. He must marry a Vance bloodline member before his 30th birthday to secure full control of the Alistair fortune. Your grandfather did not specify the generation." Thorn's voice was the epitome of cold, legal precision. Vivienne, realizing the loophole, had struck first, claiming 50% of the fortune as the more senior heir. Julian married her not out of love, but out of existential fear of losing everything. He was blackmailed into betraying me. The shock of financial manipulation overriding personal betrayal transformed my despair into cold, crystalline rage. "Where do I feature in your plan, Doctor?" I asked, my voice steadying. "You are the key to annulment. The coercion is provable. I will arm you with the tools to dismantle them both. In return, I require 10% of your eventual share of the Alistair fortune." The price was exorbitant, but the chance to inflict public, total vengeance was incalculable. I accepted. My transformation began immediately. Thorn's mandate was simple. You must discard the victim and embrace the predator. Your power lies in your knowledge of Julian's vulnerability. I spent 2 weeks immersing myself in the Alistair legal archives, turning my law degree into a weapon aimed at my mother's exposed flank. My strategic debut was a calculated slap across their faces. I returned to Vance Alistair Law, the very firm that had plotted my ruin. I occupied a small, glass-walled office situated directly opposite the executive elevator, a constant, visual threat. Julian attempted to dismiss me with corporate cruelty. "Eleanor, your presence here is disruptive." His eyes betrayed his panic. "My father is a partner, Julian. I am a highly competent lawyer. I will not abdicate my position because of your unconventional marriage," I stated, utterly devoid of warmth. I left him to contemplate my defiance. The real war, however, began at the Alistair mansion, where I was forced to reside with my pathetic, silent father. Vivienne, now Mrs. Alistair, paraded her stolen status, treating me with condescending cruelty. "A man of Julian's stature requires a woman who understands real power, darling. You are too good, too naive," she would sneer. My strategy: sow mistrust and rekindle the intense, dark attraction between Julian and me. I began to accidentally leave printouts of the annulment clauses and evidence of the coercion where Julian would find them, and held loud, strategic conversations with Dr. Thorn about the legal term coercive duress. Julian's sleep grew strained, his dependence shifting. The psychological warfare intensified within the walls of the mansion. My father, Richard, was the first collateral damage. To prove my loyalty and ruthlessness to Julian, a quality he respected more than fidelity, I accepted the audit of my father's businesses. I worked for 3 consecutive nights, not to protect him, but to find the evidence of his fiscal irregularities, a series of questionable offshore transfers designed to shield Vivienne from an old scandal. I handed the incriminating dossier to Julian. His gaze was a volatile mix of admiration and cold horror. "You destroyed your own father's reputation for me?" he asked, his voice low. "I destroyed weakness, Julian. Something you failed to do at the altar," I responded, my heart numb. The act sealed my position as his necessary, brutal equal. The tension reached a boiling point by the poolside. Julian approached me, his composure shredded. "You are meticulously punishing me, Eleanor," he said, his voice raw with need and fear. "No. I am proving my value. You abandoned me for power. If you knew I am the only one capable of saving you from her complete control, what would you do?" I moved closer, letting him feel the intoxicating danger of my presence. "I hate the traitor, Julian. But that hatred is merely the framework for a power relationship you understand." I moved away before he could act, leaving him consumed by the conflict. The plot thickened with the arrival of Grant Alistair, Julian's cousin and relentless rival. Grant saw me as the perfect pawn. He proposed an alliance, marriage, a 60-40 split of the fortune, and the destruction of Julian and Vivienne. I feigned interest, but my true goal was to use Grant as a controlled detonation device. I manipulated him into leaking the details of a secret clause to Vivienne, making her paranoid that Grant and I were plotting a joint attack. Vivienne, overreacting precisely as I had planned, directed Grant to frame me for corporate espionage, promising him a larger cut if I were eliminated. Grant planted sophisticated, untraceable malware and incriminating files in my office system. Julian, confronted with the internal security alert, demanded an explanation. "Is your loyalty to Thorn, to Grant, or solely to your own relentless ambition?" My counter-coup was swift. I revealed that I had allowed Grant to install the malware. It was a Trojan horse. It was not stealing Alistair data. It was routing data from Vivienne's personal server. My laptop then displayed irrefutable proof. Encrypted messages showing Vivienne was systematically diverting massive Alistair funds into offshore accounts, using corporate shells provided by Grant. I laid a trap for the real predator, Julian. Vivienne was draining your empire. Grant was her desperate accomplice. Julian's initial terror was replaced by a staggering awe. He reached for his desk phone, not to call security, but to confirm the full scale of Vivienne's betrayal. The consequences of my counter-coup were immediate and catastrophic. The evidence of massive fund diversion, though it defeated Vivienne, triggered a full-scale federal investigation. Dr. Thorn called an emergency meeting. "They are going to freeze all Alistair assets, Julian. The fortune won't matter if it's placed under judicial hold. The only legal maneuver to avoid insolvency is to prove immediate, absolute family stability and transfer temporary fiduciary control to a trusted spouse." Julian was trapped. The divorce from Vivienne would take months, plunging the company into ruin. Julian summoned me to his private boardroom, his face exhausted, his usual immaculate suit rumpled. "The regulatory body demands a publicly stable marital partner and a complete, temporary transfer of power to bypass the immediate freeze. We must enact a sham marriage within 72 hours. A legal union that demonstrates family continuity under my grandfather's clause." The audacity was shocking, but the logic was irrefutable. "You are asking me to commit corporate bigamy, Julian? While technically married to my mother," I stated, controlling the tremor in my voice. He looked me straight in the eye, devoid of romance, purely focused on survival. "No. I'm asking you to be the legal loophole." Thorn confirmed it. "The marriage to Vivienne will be retroactively annulled, but we need to act now. You save the Alistair name, or the entire empire collapses." I saw my final opportunity for ultimate control. I agreed, but imposed my ultimate conditions. "There will be no shared room, Julian. Not until the auditor clears us. The fiduciary transfer of power must be total and irrevocable until the investigation concludes. I administer the company under scrutiny, not you. I will be the queen of the Alistair Corporation, and you will be my consort. You accept my conditions to save your fortune?" He, with no other recourse, accepted. The preparations for the sham marriage were a masterclass in tension. We had 2 days to prepare. Vivienne, still legally Mrs. Alistair, was confined to a wing of the mansion, screaming and attempting to leak information to the press, her voice muffled by the soundproofing. Julian and I spent the hours not planning a ceremony, but signing legal documents, transferring billions in assets and power. The wedding itself was clinical: a private judge, a small, somber office, and a few high-level partners as witnesses. I wore a tailored navy power suit, Julian a dark gray suit. We exchanged legal documents instead of rings, and shook hands instead of kissing, all while agents from the regulatory body loomed outside. The only sign of the dark passion that fueled us was the intense, volatile eye contact we maintained, a silent pact of power. Our sham marriage forced us into uncomfortable, continuous proximity in the Alistair penthouse. The emotional stakes escalated. Julian, having transferred full control of the company and my loyalty yet unproven, was consumed by paranoia. He began testing me, unsure whether I would complete my mission to save the company or betray him and seize the entire fortune, disappearing with the liquid assets. This became the grand test of loyalty. Julian presented me with the key to a fortified vault, the Alistair primary repository, containing billions in gold and bearer bonds. He then orchestrated an elaborate, convincing false alarm that the federal agents were about to breach the penthouse doors to seize all liquid assets. The camera focused intensely on my dilemma: use the key to grab the fortune and run, fulfilling the prophecy of the opportunistic fortune hunter, or stay and fight for the company I was now legally bound to. The tension was suffocating. I did not run. Instead, I calmly used the key, but not to open the vault. I used it to activate a silent, internal security alert that routed a full log of Julian's asset transfer plan to Dr. Thorn, exposing Julian's test. I then confronted Julian, standing defiantly in the living room as the false alarm sirens wailed outside. "You failed the test, Julian. I risked my freedom, my reputation, and my legal career to save the Alistair name, and you doubted me. Our marriage is not just a business contract. It is a pact of trust that you have just shattered." My voice broke, not with fear but with genuine anger at his failure of faith. Julian, humbled and stripped bare by his own insecurity, staggered toward me. "Forgive me, Eleanor. I am defined by betrayal. I cannot trust. I cannot love." He confessed his deepest flaw: the inability to trust, born from his mother's abandonment and his own moral compromises. "I am sorry. I tested you because I fear losing you more than I fear losing the fortune itself." His vulnerability was devastatingly honest. The anger and the years of suppressed desire exploded simultaneously. He grabbed me not with the cold formality of the sham marriage, but with a desperate, savage need. The camera held on the raw, uncontrollable kiss that followed, the first physical confirmation of the dark, powerful attraction we had both denied. This newfound passion was volatile. We had crossed a boundary, but the resentment and the contract were still intact. We established a new, highly aggressive game, a contract of passion. We began to share Julian's master bedroom, but our interactions were a series of power plays, challenges, and debates over corporate strategy, often dissolving into moments of fierce, desperate intimacy. Every kiss was a renegotiation of power. I used his sudden, consuming affection to solidify my legal control, demanding that he confess all the details of his past betrayals to Dr. Thorn, providing more evidence to finally annihilate Vivienne's legal claims. He resisted, but my power over him, both legal and emotional, was absolute. Finally signed the annulment papers after a massive financial settlement, was not gone. She was Enra. The drama reached its peak with the return of the formidable enemy, Vivienne having get. She orchestrated a spectacular act of revenge from the shadows, using her ex-ally Grant Alistair, who was now a fugitive. Vivienne's last stand was to expose our entire facade. Grant leaked a heavily edited version of my initial agreement with Dr. Thorn, $10% of the fortune, to the regulatory body, claiming our quick marriage was a premeditated, fraudulent scheme to manipulate the inheritance clause and steal the fortune. The press went into a frenzy. Julian and I were summoned to a final, brutal hearing before the regulatory board. The threat was real: jail time for corporate fraud and the permanent seizure of the Alistair Corporation. The legal showdown was intense. Julian and I sat side by side, but the board's prosecutor focused on the proof of my greed, the audio of my 10% demand. The room held its breath. Julian was forced to choose: save himself and his reputation by throwing me under the bus, or honor our pact. I looked at him, not with fear but with a silent challenge. I gave him the power to abandon me again, just as he had at the altar. Julian chose the loyalty forged in fire. He stood up, not as a defendant but as a CEO taking control. He produced the complete, unedited recordings of Vivienne's blackmail and the documents detailing her attempted poisoning of my father years ago, proof I had entrusted to him earlier. He used the evidence of her moral turpitude to discredit the entire prosecution, arguing that the charges were orchestrated by a vengeful, criminal party. My marriage to Eleanor was a necessity to save this corporation from a criminal element, an element I married out of fear. Eleanor is my partner, my equal, and the only person who demonstrated the loyalty and ruthlessness to protect the Alistair legacy. The prosecution's case crumbled. Vivienne was indicted for multiple counts of fraud and obstruction of justice. The sight of my mother, the great Julian Vance, being led out of the courthouse in handcuffs, was the ultimate, satisfying conclusion to my arc of revenge. Grant was captured and implicated in the conspiracy. The Alistair Corporation was cleared, its assets safe, and my control was absolute. The victory was complete, but the silence after the storm was deafening. Julian and I returned to the penthouse, the remnants of our trauma still lingering. The conversation that followed was the most important of our lives. He did not immediately propose. He confessed his deepest truths. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. Not just for the altar but for the weakness that allowed me to betray you. I love you, but my greatest fear is that you will use your power to leave me." My forgiveness was not cheap. It was a long, emotional monologue about the cost of the betrayal and the price of trust. "You broke me at the altar, Julian. You must understand that I chose you not for redemption, but because you proved you could be saved. You have to earn my trust every single day." He finally stood before me in my humble office, the scene of our initial power play. He delivered his final desperate appeal, the one I had waited a lifetime to hear. He dropped to one knee, the gesture no longer forced but utterly genuine. "Eleanor Vance, will you give me the honor of being my wife? Not for the fortune but because I love you, because you are my intellectual equal, and because you are the only person in this world I have ever truly feared losing? Will you marry me not as my trophy but as my partner in power, in trust, and in life?" The answer was immediate. "Yes, Julian Alistair. I will marry you." The kiss that followed was not one of revenge, but the confirmation of a new, complex contract. The final wedding was intimate, held in the quiet gardens of the mansion, attended only by my contrite father and Dr. Thorn, who observed with a satisfied smirk. I wore a simple, elegant gown, and the rings were exchanged not as symbols of ownership, but as symbols of mutual conquest. The true final scene is not the ceremony but the boardroom. The video accelerates through flashes of our life as co-CEOs of the Alistair Corporation, a unified, formidable front. Julian and I side by side signing billion-dollar contracts. The world watched, confused by the sudden, successful reconciliation. The camera focuses on a close-up of my face as I sign the final papers, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. The marriage was sealed, not with a romantic kiss, but with a signature on a document of shared power. The true contract of the Alistair dynasty was signed, sealed, and delivered, a pact forged in the fires of betrayal and absolute vengeance. The final marriage of power and vengeance. So, drama lovers, Eleanor won the war, but do you think Julian's love is real, or is this just a contract of permanent control? Drop your verdict in the comments. If you were hooked by this plot, smash that like button and subscribe for more full dramas that will shock you to your core.